Life had been steady, or so I thought. My girlfriend and I had built a life together, filled with trust and shared goals. We had even taken the step of opening a joint bank account for mutual expenses. Everything seemed perfect, until one evening, I came across a post on social media that stopped me in my tracks. A friend tagged her in a photo. It wasn't the typical outing with her coworkers that she mentioned. She was at a beach resort, smiling, laughing, and enjoying herself. But it wasn't the location that made my heart sink. It was the company. The man in the photo with her wasn't a colleague or an old friend. It was her ex. When I confronted her about it, she tried to dismiss it, claiming it was just an old photo. But the timestamp on the post didn't lie. It was recent, and she was there at that very moment. I was furious, but I tried to keep my composure. I knew that jumping to conclusions without fully understanding the situation wouldn't help. So, I waited for her to return home. When she walked through the door, I calmly asked her about the trip. She seemed caught off guard, probably expecting a different type of question. I showed her the photo on my phone and waited for an explanation. She hesitated for a moment, then said it was a spontaneous trip they decided to take for old times' sake. She claimed there was nothing romantic between them and that it was simply about reconnecting as friends. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. Her eyes avoided mine, and her tone was defensive. I couldn't help but wonder, how could she have kept this from me? Why was she hiding it? The thought of her being secretive made me uneasy. The more I thought about it, the more questions flooded my mind. She had always been open with me before, so why was she acting this way now? I tried to tell myself that maybe I was overthinking things, that maybe it was just a harmless trip. But the fact that she didn't mention it beforehand, didn't even bring it up once, felt like a red flag. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it. The connection between her and her ex didn't seem like it was just casual. Why had she chosen to go on vacation with him, of all people? Her explanation didn't seem to add up, and I felt a sense of betrayal gnawing at me. I knew I needed some space to think. I didn't want to make a rash decision, but I also couldn't ignore how hurt I felt. I decided to take a step back and consider my next move carefully. What should I do? Should I confront her more directly, or should I wait to see if she would come clean on her own? After days of thinking it over, I realized I couldn't continue in this uncertain state. I needed clarity, and I needed to protect myself. The feeling of not knowing what was truly happening in my relationship was unsettling, and I couldn't ignore the deep sense of unease growing inside me. I took a hard look at the situation. Our finances were tied together, and while I trusted her with most aspects of our life, this secrecy was a step too far. I couldn't just let it slide, not when it involved my peace of mind and our shared future. I decided it was time to make a bold move, one that would send a clear message. I froze our joint bank account. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I had always been transparent with her about everything, including our financial matters. We had agreed to share responsibility for bills, rent, and savings. But this secret trip, this hidden side of her life that I wasn't part of, was too much for me to ignore. The joint account was a symbol of trust, and right now, that trust felt broken. The moment I froze the joint bank account, I knew it would cause a reaction. I wasn't sure what exactly would happen, but I had to follow through with my decision. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about protecting myself and making it clear that I wouldn't tolerate being kept in the dark. The next day she called me. Her voice was filled with frustration and confusion. She couldn't understand why I had done what I did. When I explained my reasoning, she went silent for a moment before responding. "Why would you do this? You know we've always handled things together," she said. I could hear the hurt in her voice, but I wasn't convinced. "I thought we were handling things together," I replied. "But you chose to go on a secret vacation with your ex, without telling me. That's not something I can just overlook." She tried to justify her actions again, but this time, it felt more like she was trying to defend herself than actually explain anything. She insisted it wasn't a big deal, that I was overreacting. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more she wasn't telling me. As the days passed, I reflected on everything. The phone calls, the arguments, the uncertainty. I realized something important. I wasn't just upset about the trip itself. I was hurt because of the lack of transparency. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and it felt like it had been chipped away little by little. Despite her insistence that everything was fine, the doubt lingered. I thought back to the countless little moments when she'd been less open than usual, when she'd been evasive about simple things that seemed unimportant at the time. They all added up now, and it became clear that something had shifted in our dynamic. I didn't know when it happened, but I couldn't ignore that I wasn't the person I used to be around her, someone who was willing to accept the unknown for the sake of love. I began to understand that I wasn't just reacting to her trip. I was reacting to a deeper issue. It wasn't only about this specific incident, but about the way she had been slowly pulling away, without acknowledging it. I had been waiting for her to admit it, but now I knew that I had to take control of my own happiness and stop relying on someone else to validate my feelings. The time had come for me to make the most difficult decision I'd ever faced. The emotional weight of the past few days, the uncertainty, and the growing realization that my trust had been shaken, all led me to a point where I had to ask myself, what do I want moving forward? I knew I couldn't continue living with constant doubt and the feeling of being left in the dark. I valued transparency, honesty, and mutual respect, things I felt were no longer present in our relationship. It wasn't about the vacation or the ex. It was about the bigger picture of where we were heading. I met with her one last time to talk. She apologized, saying she never meant for things to escalate to this point. She explained that the trip with her ex had been innocent, just a way to reconnect with someone she had once cared about. But as she spoke, I couldn't help but feel like the apology was more about easing her guilt than addressing the deeper issues that had come to light. I realized that, despite her remorse, our paths had diverged too far. It had changed. I had learned that protecting my peace of mind and my sense of self-worth was more important than holding on to a relationship that no longer felt secure. In that moment, I knew I had to walk away. I couldn't stay in a relationship built on uncertainties, no matter how much I once cared for her. I unfroze the bank account, closed it, and moved on. The end of any chapter, especially one as meaningful as a relationship, is always difficult. But sometimes, letting go is the only way to reclaim your peace and move forward with clarity. And with that, I knew I had made the right choice for myself.